Hey, I'm Zach. Welcome back to Bear Mountain Builds, and today we're going to be building some fluted bedside tables. We're kicking off this project by stripping down my 3/4 inch sand plywood into more manageable sizes. I'm building the carcass with miter joints, so I'm setting my table saw blade to 45 degrees, then cutting the sides to length. With all the sides of the carcass cut out, I'm moving on to stripping out pieces for the base and cutting them to length. I'm adding pocket holes to attach these stretcher pieces to the legs and the carcass. I'm cutting the legs out of a piece of 2x4. I'm cutting a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch slot on the internal side of the carcass walls to hold the back panel. I'm using a piece of 1/4 inch plywood to set the depth and space the slot a 1/4 inch from the edge. I'm cutting the back panel out of a sheet of 1/4 inch plywood, then trimming it to final size. All right, we got everything cut out for these 2 nightstands. The whole process goes pretty fast. We've got our legs, we've got our bases with pocket holes drilled into them, we have our shell with a slot cut out for our back panel, and we have our back panel. Now, let's put these things together. I'm putting these miter joints together with glue and 1¼ inch brad nails. Miter joints can get really squirrely when you're trying to put them together. That's why I made this jig. I'm using 2 90-degree positioning clamps mounted on my table, then slide my 2 sections into place and add a 3rd positioning square to the top. These squares are worth their weight in gold for this project or any time you're putting together 90-degree joints. As you can see, these clamps do a great job holding everything perfectly square. All right, quick update. What you saw before was these for my bases. This was my whole pocket screw setup.
Now I figured out that this is way too many pocket screws for this amount of board, so I changed it to this, so that way when they go together, the screws are offset when they go into those legs. Much less stress on this, and it's a way better design, but you'll see all that in my plans.
With the carcass put together, I'm moving on to the base, where I made another positioning clamp jig to keep everything square. I'm using a piece of 3/4 inch plywood as a spacer to keep the base in its correct position. With the glue dry, it's time to mount the base to the carcass using glue and pocket screws. I'm using a couple pieces of 3/4 inch plywood to center the base on the bottom.
All right, we got our carcasses and bases all put together, and honestly, this whole process is really easy and they're looking super good. Now we're moving on to building out our drawers, but before we do that, please hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future projects, and hit the like button too. Now, let's keep going.
I'm stripping my drawer pieces out of 1/2 inch sanded plywood, then cutting them to final height and length. Just like the carcass, I'm cutting a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch slot. To allow the drawer bottom to slide in, I'm cutting all the way through on the back wall. Remember when making this cut to use a sacrificial board to keep everything square. I'm drilling pocket holes in the front and back drawer pieces.
All right, so we got all of our drawer sections cut out, slotted, and pocket holed, so we are ready for assembly. But first, we're gonna sand everything down while it's still flat, then put it together.
It's nice to have your cousin around so you can put her to work. I'm using the same jig as before to put everything together. The drawer bottom slides right in, and I tack it in place with 1¼ brad nails.
All right, we got our drawers all done. They're looking super good and they are rock solid. But before we get these mounted into our carcasses, we got to build some drawer fronts. Now, I'm super excited about these drawer fronts because we're going to be doing a really cool texture with some 1/2-inch dowels. But before we get to that, we got to cut up some poplar.
I'm stripping down poplar for the drawer face edge, then cutting it to length. I'm aligning the top of the stacked bit with the top of my piece, then setting the cutting depth to 1/4 inch. I need to add a tongue and groove to these poplar strips, but they're pretty small and I value my fingertips, so I cut a jig to hold the pieces while I'm running them through the router. With the tongues cut, I aligned the single blade with the tongue itself, then cut a 1/4 inch deep groove. With the edges done, I'm cutting out the center panels from 1/4 inch plywood. With everything cut out, I'm gluing and clamping the fronts together.
All right, we have all of our drawer fronts done. They're looking super good, and you know, at this point, you can just take these, put these on your bedside table, and it's gonna look sweet. But we're gonna take these bedside tables to the next level. So what we're doing is we're taking these 1/2 inch half dowels, and we're gonna cut them into small strips to pack them in here vertically on these drawer fronts. It's gonna look sweet, so let's keep going.
I'm cutting the half dowels to length. You want these to fit snug, but not to the point where you have to force them in. This whole process takes a little finessing, but I recommend doing a dry fit first to make sure everything is fitting correctly. During my dry run, I found that I needed 1/3 of a dowel on each end. I've since modified my spacing on the plan so that they shouldn't be needed anymore. To cut these 1/3 of a dowel, I hot glued a full dowel strip to a small sheet of 1/4 inch plywood, then cut it right down the center. Finally, I cut and glued in 1/4-inch back panels for spacing and support. With the fronts drying, I'm moving on to installing the sliders. I'm positioning the sliders so they'll be dead center on the drawer. Sliders can be kind of tricky to install, but with the Kreg drawer slide jig, it makes it really easy. I'm using an offcut of poplar to use as a spacer to backset the sliders so that the drawer front is even with the front of the carcass when closed. What's great about these drawer jigs is they can now be reversed and hold the drawer in place while you attach it to the slider. You want to make sure to flush up the end of the drawer slide with the front of the drawer. For the bottom drawer, instead of using the drawer jig, I just cut a couple spacers for the drawer to sit on. And with one last hard to reach screw, the drawers are done.
All right, we got our drawer fronts done. They're looking super good. I am really pleased with how they turned out. We've got our dowels on here. We got our back plates on. So now we're gonna drill 2 holes for our knobs to be able to mount on here, and then we can mount these up onto our nightstands. And after that, we are almost done because all we have left is paint.
I'm marking the holes dead center on the 6th dowel in. I'm starting with an 11/16 inch spade bit at 1/16 inch deep, which will allow the knobs to nest into the dowels. With all the nested holes drilled, I positioned the drawer fronts in place, then drilled all the way through. Now we can finally attach the drawer fronts.
All right, we got both of our nightstands put together. They look amazing. These are really turning out super great. Now we just need to get these things prepped and painted.
I filmed 2 hours of sanding, so here's 10 seconds of it.
All right, we've got both of our nightstands all put together and they are looking absolutely amazing. Now, I was getting these prepped and my original intention was I was gonna paint these a really rich, dark green, almost kind of a black, but I've decided it hurts my heart too much to actually paint these. I think they look way too good natural to paint them. So we're pivoting. We're gonna be doing a clear coat with poly on these things. So I'm gonna finish off sanding, get a poly coat on there, and these are gonna be ready to go. I sanded everything to 220 grit, then applied 2 coats of crystal clear poly with sanding in between. And with that, these nightstands are done. All right, the nightstands are done. They look amazing. I am super pleased with how these things turned out. Now, there's two reasons why I built two of these. One, I have two sides to my bed. But two, I don't have to buy any extra wood to build a second nightstand. The only thing extra I have to buy is the hardware, so there really is very little extra cost for building a second one. If you want to build these, I do have plans for these linked down below in the description, so if you're interested, go check those out. Now, if you are going to build these, I do have one thing, is I use poplar to do these fronts, and that was because I was planning on painting them, but poplar does have a greenish undertone, so if you plan on building these, I would recommend you use aspen if you want to keep them unpainted, just because the tone will match everything a little bit better. Now, as always, hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future projects. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. It helps me out a ton and I really do appreciate it. And also, leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking about this video, if there's anything you would do differently or improve upon. I love reading all your guys' comments. They mean a ton to me. So thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.